Hey, listen, I'd like to get onto this next subject with you before we let you go, Matt. I want to play this because, as I said, you know, and people may or may not believe this, but we give bouquets when they're, you know, when people deserve them, no matter where they are. And the Prime Minister did really well on a good portion of this conversation today around the history of abuse in the state system. Have a listen.
And finally, the truth's been tabled. 14 kilograms of harrowing accounts and sweeping calls for change. The magnitude of it all absorbed by survivors from the public gallery.
Many of your stories are horrific and harrowing. They are painful to read, but not nearly as painful as they were to endure.
The Prime Minister will make a formal apology in November, but one was made today.
Today I stand humbly before you in this House to offer a long overdue apology to the survivors of Lake Alice. I am sorry that it has taken so long for this acknowledgement of torture.
It was the party opposite that ordered the inquiry, but it didn't implement the interim recommendations to start a redress scheme.
But, Prime Minister, we didn't do enough. And the ball now falls to you and your government. This must be bigger than politics.
The Prime Minister says cost isn't a barrier.
We're going to do it right. It's important that we address this up and we do the very best that we can around redress. It's not about the dollars.
The final report.
So there you go. That was. We're going to play another clip as well to do with the effects on Māori through this. But first of all, either of you guys, I don't know if you've seen all of that or not. I would say congratulations to the Prime Minister. Well done, well set up. I hope you knock it out of the park. Come time for settlement or whatever it is. But it's a good start. So congrats where congrats are due. The appropriate response, and we will support him as the Labour Party are doing in what they're doing at the moment. Matt?
Yeah, if I could just, first of all, disclosure, I'm an original member of the taumata of the Royal Commission with Neville Baker, Liz Mellish and Sharon Hawke. So I've been involved from the very beginning, and then I only left when I became the chairman of the Ministry for Children, that other hateful organisation, otherwise known as Oranga Tamariki. And so, I really do hope that this isn't about the dollars and cents, because this is where the Australian Royal Commission got so bogged down in redress. And it got to the point where you had faith-based organisations in Tasmania halting the sale of assets to include the sale proceeds into redress schemes, but it never quite came off. So I think that's where a lot of these people really are at. One of the guys in the image or the video footage you just played is somebody that I know very, very well. His name was Paul Zentfeld, who was the champion of what happened at Lake Alice. And Paul and we've had our dust-ups, but my God, what a champion. And so people like Paul are now wanting to know, well, what next? Because it's really important for them, because in the interviews today and also in the statements made by a lot of people today, there was a reflection of the more than 250,000 people that have been abused in state care and faith-based organisations between 1950 and 1999. That's a figure that a lot of those people have now passed on. And a lot of their families are now living with the fight and the memory. One of the examples in Te Ao Māori is with the Waitangi Tribunal claim process around what we call the Taonga claim of Y262. That's been around for a very long time. It's never been dealt with by the Crown, and a lot of the original, in fact, all the original claimants are now dead, and the claim has been inherited by their whānau. What I would hate to see is that sort of redress scheme inherited by future generations. So it would be good to see all of them now back up their words by supporting each other across the Parliament. I think we all would agree that what has happened in this country over the last not only 50 years, but even to this day, is just evil writ large.
Yeah, Chewy.
The thing that hit me is when they weighed them.
Yeah, 14 kilos.
14 kilograms of some of the most harrowing stories.
And actually, Chewy, if you could just pause for a sec. Just pause for a sec. So I think they spoke to 2,300 people, and that was 14 kilograms. Remember, as Matt just said, there was 250,000. So imagine what it would be. It would be 100 times that heavy if everyone had told their story. So imagine that.
And can I just also share with you guys, this wasn't just about people wanting to share these stories and have their voices heard and their evidence. When I sat through a lot of the hearings in Auckland, and you saw them supported by their sons, their daughters, their grandchildren, their family members, their loved ones, their partners. And it wasn't just here in New Zealand. We had New Zealanders living in Australia coming home to give evidence in New Zealand. It was just absolute. It was more like a Truth and Reconciliation Commission, but we haven't quite got to the reconciliation yet.
Yeah. Sorry, Chewie, we both interrupted you. You're talking about the weight of the papers.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah. Look, this has been a long time coming. The abuse and state care stuff has left such a psychic scar on this country that those state institutions just caused absolute mayhem on people that were made wards of the state or were put in borstals or all of that sort of thing. We are still, to this day, dealing with the fallout from those organizations. And whoever was going to be at the wheel, whoever was going to be at in the Prime Minister's seat at that point would have to read out that apology.
Yeah.
I guess, you know, you did say, look, we're going to recognize that the words out of Luxon were good. But does he feel it? The man hasn't been part of government for very long. And he has spent the last 6 months going absolutely hell for leather on boot camps and expanding prisons. That really takes away from it for me.
Yeah, it's a really good point, Joey. And it's what we're going to kind of get into next. It's a really good point. And like in this clip that we're about to play coming up now, Erica Stanford's at the presser, and you can see she gets choked up. I mean, I got choked up watching it. I'm feeling choked up right now, knowing what I'm about to watch for a third fucking time. And you can see that she's feeling it. And I understand what you're saying. I think at the moment, what I'm going to do, and I think what we will put out there officially, is that he's saying the right things at the moment to get to the end of the process. But there's so much stuff that this government has done, and even in this clip we're going to see it, that they then kind of hold at arm's length. And I'm thinking about issues around Māoridom. They hold at arm's length some issues that if you could see how to enmesh this whole conversation, you might find a fucking answer. But at the moment, you're saying the right words, like you say, Chewie, but there's other parts of that would be a part of this conversation, and meshing them together to get an overall picture, holistically, you might say, that they're not going to address. So how will we ever solve this? I mean, you guys are welcome to respond to that first before I push play or whatever.
Yeah, can I? Maybe I'll go first if that's all right, Chewie. One of the last jobs I did before getting sick and leaving the Ministry of Health was being responsible for the Coronial Investigations Review. And so in my time, I've read hundreds, if not thousands, of coronial reports. And these are the deep dive forensic investigations into why somebody took their own life. And these are stories, just very similar to some of the stories that you'll hear or read in the evidence and the documents that are going to be produced as a result of the Royal Commission. And they tell a story about the how this all started. And if I was to liken it to a business conversation, it's about supply chains. Something starts somewhere. Somebody's life goes off the rails for a purpose. And what we fail to do as a society is we fail to recognize when we can step in, intervene, support them, prevent the inevitable sometimes from happening. Instead, we take a very clinical approach to these things. And that's what I heard from Luxon today, to be honest. I heard a very clinical approach to how we're going to deal with it. It's like the robotics of middle management. We'll find the money. Well, if you can find the money, why are we sacking all these people, which is just going to create more havoc and more chaos in people's lives? Why are we doing what we're doing to send people down rabbit holes? And the point I'm trying to get to is also about the gangs and so on and so forth. Well, you know, when you read some of the stories of gang members who have been abused in state care, who have had their lives ripped apart, and as a result are in the position that they're in. Now, admittedly, not every gang member has been in that position, but my God, a lot of them are. And not just gang members, but, you know, I visited the Youth Detention Centre in the Hawke's Bay as part of my role as chair of Oranga Tamariki. There were 19 boys behind the wire. Yes, I'd committed some horrendous crimes, but when you sit down with those, and they were children, you know, I'll never forget when I asked them the question, what brought you in here? I won't go into the why they were there, but, you know, a lot of them just wanted their mums. They just wanted their mothers. And what was terrible about it is a lot of those kids had already got their first kid themselves. So all we're doing is repeating the same process. Now, that youth detention centre is in the Mangaroa adult prison complex. So all we're doing is furthering the aspiration of supply chains and providing more numbers into the adult prison system by not stopping what's going on. We're feeding the beast.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, but I just saw him as a robot.
Yeah, fair enough. Chewy, before we play with it, anything?
I saw a story about the first intake for the boot camps. 9 out of 10 of the kids that are going to this are Māori. So, straight away there, I don't trust it. I don't trust the state to learn lessons from this sort of stuff. It went on too long. And it we get us hard on for punishment rather than stopping it from happening in the first place. The money that is being poured into prisons, we've said this again and again and again in the show, should be poured into schools, should be poured into communities, should be poured into the people that are on the front line that go, we deal with these people every day. We see the cycle. If you can identify the cycle, you can fucking break it.
That's right. You got to find circuit breakers, true. You got to find circuit breakers.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And every time we get a right-wing government, they're like, no, lock them up. I mean, I forget what minister it was, proudly posting up pictures within the last week of a youth detention centre or some secure facility for youth. Going, look at these wonderful modern facilities. And I saw pastel paint and heavy steel doors. And she's focusing on taking a picture of one of the inmates had made a lovely array of cookies. But all the windows were barred. Every door had a huge lock on it.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter what color paint you put that in. You're locking a kid in a room.
Yeah.
Someone whose brain isn't developed 100% yet. Whose decision-making process isn't set in stone, and suddenly you take that away from them, you lock them in a room while they're still developing. It's not the solution. That's because we know that because it hasn't fucking solved it. But we're not brave enough to try something else.
There was 3 parts to the news tonight. There was the general covering story. Then there was the bit about the religious institutions and how terrible they've been, worse than the state in these situations. And then there was also, which is a part of my heritage. I grew up in the Catholic Church and families in the Catholic Church, went through Catholic boarding school. So, I'm keen as mustard to delve deep into that at some stage as well, because it's just shocking. It's just a shocking situation. But we'll have a look at this section. The other section was what happened to Māori in the system. And Chewy, you talked about abuse in the past tense. There is a gentleman, a young fella in this who's just come out of the system, and he makes very clear this didn't stop in 1999. The abuse that's happening in care. So let's have a look at this story, and then we'll have a chat about it and then wrap up with you, Matthew.
Māori children made up the majority of those in state care, with the inquiry finding they were also more likely to be sent to harsher institutions. Māori and Pacific survivors also endured higher levels of physical abuse, breaching the Treaty of Waitangi and giving rise to gang membership. Political editor Mikey Sherman reports.
This is the part that Luxon's missing right now. Not wanting to talk to the Harry Tams of the world, cracking down on, locking people up, cracking down on gangs. Until you address this part of the equation, there's going to be no solution.
The rise of gangs in New Zealand between the 1950s and 1980s can be traced back to state care abuse, which many survivors say was a pipeline to prison.
When I went into the prison the first time, I'd never been there before. But we get into the yards and 80% of the people is because we all grew up together and we were brought up together in state care.
Rawiri Waretini Karena isn't a gang member, but having entered state care at the age of 5, by 17 he was convicted of murder.
I take full responsibility of my actions, but there were things that happened in state care which also contributed to the environment that I was brought up in.
The Commission found between the 1950s and 80s, Māori experienced heightened state surveillance and targeting by New Zealand police and other government agencies.
We are determined that gangs cannot peddle harm and suffering on their fellow citizens. We will continue to work with making sure that they have an opportunity to turn their lives around through rehabilitation.
So that's the part that he will get the brick back again. So it's like, if you cannot see that the exact inquiry you're going through today and apologising for has a direct link, if not is the direct reason for the issues that you're seeing with gangs today, Mr. Luxon, then there's no helping you. Then you are not a person of outcomes. You're a person of meanness and retribution and all sorts of other words for putting the knee on the neck of people, but you're not looking for the best outcome because you're not using the best, you're not taking the best path to get to those outcomes. Sorry, this has got about 60 seconds, guys. I'm sorry for interrupting.
Māori children are still overrepresented in care today.
I believe it's 67% of young people in care are Māori.
Ihorangi Reweti Peters came out of state care in October.
Abuse did not stop at 1999. It is still happening.
Is there work that needs to be done? Yes. And I've set those expectations.
The Minister says greater devolution to community is the solution, but with continued state oversight.
I think it's actually disgusting that my job does have to exist.
Erica Stanford spoke of the young unwed pregnant mothers in care.
That were deliberately underfed because they wanted to have easy births and small babies. And then they drugged them up and they took their babies. They never got to hold them. That is confronting.
Stripped of their culture and care, Māori have intergenerational scars.
It disconnects you from your language, from your culture, from your heritage. It disconnects you from the land of the whenua.
Rawiri now holds a PhD and works as a tertiary lecturer, a rare triumph in a tale of sorrow.
Yeah.
Matthew.
I mean, look, guys, I've sat down with each one of those people that were interviewed by TVNZ in that piece. Ihorangi Reweti Peters is an outstanding young man, and Rawiri was one of the first in a group of people that I met. I think, you know, to be honest, look, I'm not going to say that gangs are good. They're not. But in all the gang members that I sat down with, I remember Johnny Apatu and Rex Timu in the Hawke's Bay, Martin Kaipo, a former gang president up in Whangarei, in Otangarei, and you sit down with these people and they're just like your father. They're just like your dad. They've just had a shit life. But each one of them was in search of something that they were taken away from. And in many ways, gangs have been created as a result of that missing link being whānau and family. And so that you search for something to attach yourself to. And that was the story that I heard writ large. And so when, you know, you've got a double narrative going on here, you've got a narrative saying, oh, we'll fix this. You know, I'm from middle management. I'm going to sort this out. Everyone's going to move forward together. Kumbaya. Bullshit. Absolute bullshit. Because the second narrative is this. We're going to bust those gangs and we're going to send them all to prison and we're going to lock them all up and throw away the key and bugger this and bugger that. Well, okay, so what are we doing to change to circuit break the whole thing? We're not. But just reverting to form. And the other thing too, you know, compensation is not going to resolve the issue of people over multiple generations being ripped from their families. You know, the number of children in state care that were Māori when I was there was 67%. That was in 2022, 2021, 2022. Ihorangi is absolutely right. And if in the last government they had been able to get their extension as a Royal Commission, I think they were seeking more funding, then they could have picked up a whole lot of other people from 1999 to 2021, 22. Whether or not New Zealand is ready for the Band-Aid to be ripped back off not only our past but our present, I'm not too sure. But certainly that abuse has not stopped. All you have to do is have a look at the reports coming out of the Independent Children's Monitor to know what's been going on recently.
Yeah, I've got nothing else really to add to what Matt's just said. Chewie, you want to jump in there? You're more than welcome.
That statistic of how many Māori make up kids in state care, that poses a particular question. And for some people, they'll take it as, what's wrong with Māori?
Yeah.
Why do they keep on getting put in state care? It's never a question of what's wrong with society that means that so many Māori end up institutionalized in these machines that just turn out hard, broken people. We haven't looked at that at all.
No, a lot of it comes down to a combination of both conscious and unconscious bias. So if you're a social worker going into the home of a Māori and you see 6 kids sleeping in the lounge, sometimes that's how we sleep on the marae. But somebody who's not familiar with that environment sees poverty straight away. Well, no, that's just how things are, not in a bad way or a negative way. The other thing that I find really fascinating, just to back up and reinforce what I'm saying about the present, you'll see on the news recently about the New Zealand police admitting that the photos that they've been taking of young offenders that was brought up in the Wairarapa in relation to the majority of them being Māori have not been disposed of. So the police have been continuing their behaviour right up until, obviously the last couple of years as well. And so it takes 2 things to happen. Number one, cultural change at the individual and societal level of New Zealanders saying, yeah, we're just not going to see people through the lens that we're used to in the 50s and 60s. And the second one is our institutions need to change the lens that they see Māori through as well. And I get so pissed off. I'm sorry. I'm just going to fucking say it. I get so pissed off with people who see Māori through the lens of a deficit model. Not every Māori is on the unemployment benefit. Not every Māori smacks their kids and throws them against walls. We don't all sit around smoking dope and playing the guitar, drinking crates of booze and beer. That's university students down in fucking Dunedin. The vast majority of Māori are in the middle class. We pay mortgages, we pay rates. We shop like everybody else does at Countdown. We worry more about the cost of fucking eggs than we do about a packet of cigarettes, for crying out loud. And so I just wish that people would stop casting us about as some sort of drummed up losers who always just talk about colonisation as being our lot in life. Fuck. Over it.